Hey everyone, I'm Epion, and today we're doing a deck tech for my Talrand Sky Summoner deck. This is something I've featured on here a couple times. It's a lot of fun to play, especially if you like drawing cards. It's just like a really fun, cheap, tempo deck. And so one of the nice things about playing this Talrand deck, especially the way this one's built, is that you can basically build the whole thing for less than 10 tickets. I mean, sparing certain cards I don't remember what Cavern of Souls is last I checked, but all the Mana Crypts, Vault, Soul Ring, all that stuff has come way down since the reprint. Aside from a couple things like Dig Through Time, these are all pretty much bargain bin cards that you won't have any trouble tracking down, which is one of the cool parts. But it's a really strong deck, and it's a lot of fun to play. So I mean, we'll start sort of here on the right. You can see my utility lands. We got Riptide Laboratory. Basically, it just allows us to return Talrand to our hand if need be. So it's sort of like an ejection seat for Talrand if we don't have any other way to deal with removal or something like that. Reliquary Tower is obviously really nice in here because we're drawing lots and lots of cards. So we want to make sure that we have that no maximum hand size so we don't have to be discarding. Because drawing and playing spells is one of the biggest resources in this deck. You have to be able to cast spells to get any value out of Talrand, and so that really helps. The other thing is Reliquary Tower is Cavern of Souls. This is obviously huge with Talrand. He's the only creature in the entire deck, so basically we have this in here to protect us from things like Hinder or Counterspell if we can manage to rush him out on turn 1 or turn 2. So it's just nice to have that little bit of extra protection. Beyond that, we just have 34 islands. So the land total in this one is 37. Depending on how you like, your monocolored kind of aggro tempo decks, you may actually decide to cut a land in favor of another card. I found that right here at about 37 was just right. I got enough lands to be able to consistently cast Talrand, and normally not so many lands that I never drew spells that I needed to get value out of him. So after our 37 lands, we have basically just all of our mana enablers. So Basalt Monolith, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, Fellwar Stone, which is just a nice 2-mana rock that enters the battlefield untapped. At worst, it makes colorless mana. At best, it's just a better version of Sky Diamond. And obviously a Mind Stone, which gets us 1 mana and also has the ability to draw a card. So, and another place where you can obviously cut some cards, put in some better cards, things like Fellwar Stone and Sky Diamond aren't the best. If you've got things like, obviously, Mox Sapphire, that's an insta-slam over this, Power 9 cards like that. This next category is basically all of my utility artifacts. So part of, going with this strategy is going to be protecting Talrand. Whisper Silk Cloak is huge for that. It also allows him to get in for damage, if we need to put away a game. Then we have Lightning Greaves, another way to protect him, and it equips for 0. Mask, Hexproof. This is one of the more expensive ways to give Hexproof, but it also gives him a buff, so it helps him hold off some of the earlier threats in some games, which can be a nice added benefit. Nuruk Stealthsuit is obviously huge in this deck. Gives Shroud, but you also have the ability to attach it as an instant, which means it gives you a really nice way to protect not only Talrand, but also all of your Drakes that you're going to be making. And then we also have Swiftfoot Boots. It seems like if our goal is to protect him, we probably want to be running both. This is another area where you may cut one of the two in favor of another action spell. Next we have Runechanter's Pike. Obviously you can see the large volume of spells that we're playing. So Runechanter's Pike obviously gives First Strike and gives that +X+O. which can win games single-handedly. You just attach it to a Drake and swing, or in combination with something like Whispersill Cloak, you could get in for commander damage very easily as well. Hall of Triumph is obviously really great. It gives us the ability to buff all of our 2/2 Drakes, which can obviously be a great benefit for us. Unfortunately, if our opponent ends up clogging the field with their flyers as well, it's very hard to get these 2/2 Drakes through. So even +1/+1 is huge. And obviously, because we're playing so many spells, we want to make sure that we have a way to get them back into our library so we can get some more action. So we have Elixir of Immortality. Next, this is sort of our suite of removal, counterspells, some value spells to help us get more value out of our normal spells. So in terms of removal, Pongify and Rapid Hybridization are obviously great. 1 mana instants. They get a 3/3 frog, but you're also getting a 2/2 Drake, which helps take some of the sting out of that. Silent Departure, obviously not great as a sorcery, but the flashback can always be nice to rely on, especially late game. You can bounce a big threat and then swing. And then obviously we have classic Unsummon, Vapor Snag. Boomerang is always a great way to use it as a pseudo Stone Rain or to deal with a Planeswalker, something like that that's causing you issues. Void Snare is also another great way to deal with things like Planeswalkers or enchantments, artifacts, which blue doesn't normally favorably interact with. Next we have Cyclonic Rift. Blowout is what they should call this card, because every time you cast it, it basically is one-sided Wrath. It basically belongs in every blue deck. After that we have Inundate, another good late game spell, something you don't want to see early on, but the ability to bounce all non-blue creatures can be huge against a lot of decks, and this can just allow you to swing through for the win. Next we have some of our utility enchantments. We have Favorable Winds. Obviously our goal is to create a lot of flyers. So for 2 mana, giving all of our creatures that fly +1/+1 is obviously great. Next is Military Intelligence. Again, we want to get back to drawing a lot of cards. We're typically going to be attacking with a lot of small creatures, so meeting this attack with 2 or more to draw a card shouldn't be hard on a regular basis. Skywise Teachings, one of the newer cards that just came out in Cons block. Obviously, the vast majority of this deck is non-creature spells. This is our 1 creature spell. So it allows us to get a little bit of extra value out of any spell that we play. You know, you can basically turn what would be a small draw spell into a draw and 2 2/2 flyers. So this is a nice bit of added value, and it helps turn those late game spells into a little bit more of a threat. Bident of Thassa, obviously another great way to control combat and let you draw cards. You can obviously force your opponent into awkward combat and then swing through to get a bunch of extra cards, refill your hand, so it's obviously very nice. Propaganda is something we added in here to help prevent us from getting blown out by token decks and early aggro. We want to make sure that they have to pay the war tax. So it allows us to slow down those more aggressive decks. After that, these are all of our counter spells. We wanted to really keep down, low in the cost, and also put in some of these X spells that can be good value early on, especially if you're playing second. Even Syncopate for 1 can be huge. So we've got Mana Leak. Obviously, making them pay 3 mana can be great in a lot of situations. Good old-fashioned Counterspell. Nullify, which helps us with those early creature decks. Since we're playing a lot of blue sources, I actually liked having this because the aura portion isn't always relevant, but at the cost of a blue and another blue, we get that added mode, which sometimes can help. Then we obviously have Dissipate. Another great way to exile problem spells that we don't want going to the graveyard. It's also obviously really nice against Reanimator decks. Then we have Dissolve so that we can obviously counter and get a Scry so we can hopefully ship something that doesn't do what we need. Hinder, obviously still good on Magic the Gathering Online. As some of you may not know, on Magic Online, the Tuck rule change that was discussed, I think about a month ago, isn't in effect, so you still can tuck enemy commanders. The other nice thing about this is you can just tuck problem cards that you don't want your opponent to find. That being said, if you're playing a deck that's black, for instance, using Hinder to counter something is normally not all that great. They'll normally just fish up whatever you put back into their library. Then obviously we've got Logic Knot. This is a great counterspell because we can just delve for its additional cost instead of having to deal with paying for the X. Or we can pay X and exile to try and get, you know, an adequate amount. So a lot of versatility for this one. And then obviously Syncopate, another one that allows us to exile instead of put in the graveyard, which can definitely be just great against some decks. And again, if you're going second, this can sometimes be a huge blowout, even just doing that they have to pay one, using it like a mana tithe. So everything that you see here in our last column, this is kind of the bread and butter. This is all of our draw spells. And so you'll notice that the majority of these are going to be 1 and 2 mana spells. Obviously, our goal with Talrand is to play a lot of instant speed draw and to play a lot of cantrips. And so Gitaxian Probe gives us a little bit of info, draws us a card, and it can be played for free, which can be huge. Brainstorm, this is one that I haven't loved every time I've cast it, but it does allow us to sometimes filter lands out of our hand if we're going for one really aggressive turn. And so that's one thing that I do like about it. You can put 2 lands in and get 3 cards out. And so, especially at instant speed, that can sometimes be exactly what you need to put the game away. Obsessive Search, literally just pay 1, draw a card, and if they make you discard it, you still get to pay 1 and draw a card. Opt is kind of nice. You can use it like a little bit of control for your opponents, especially if you see... Oh, sorry, it's not Opt. I was thinking of another card. This one is nice because you get basically Scry. And so for 1 mana, look at the top card, Scry, and then draw a card. Not too shabby. Peek, another card like Gitaxian Probe. You get to check out their hand, draw a card, 1 mana instant. Ponder, obviously one of the more versatile draw spells. 1 mana, you get to see 3 deep, and then decide whether you want to shuffle them away and draw a card. A lot of versatility. Portent was the card that I was thinking of, because you get to look at your opponent's deck as well. You don't have to pick your own. And so if they're playing something like Courser of Kruphix or Oracle of Moldiah, you can see the top of their library, so you know that sometimes there's a problem spell coming. You can use this to get rid of it in the meantime. And so obviously that can be a lot of value. Obviously the drawing a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, you know, very old verbiage on a card, but it still draws you a card at 1 mana, so that's not too bad. Preordain, another card along the same lines as Ponder. You get to see 2 deep, decide what to do with them, and then draw a card. Obviously a lot of good value there. Quicken, at worst, this is a card that's a 1 mana instant that draws you a card, but in combination with something like Inundate, you know, which is obviously a sorcery, that can be a huge blowout, or even comboing it with something like Council of the Soratami or Divination that allows you to draw more cards. So you get the added utility of being able to play a sorcery during their turn, which can be huge. I mean, paying 4 mana to draw 3 cards at instant speed, that's not too bad. Our next card is Reach Through Mists, just a straight 1 mana instant draw card. Serum Visions, Preordain's little brother. I know this is a card that's huge in Modern since the other card got banned. Still 1 mana, draw a card, and then see 2 deep after that. It's nice for setting up your follow-up turn. Thought Scour, another 1 mana instant that draws you a card. The mill, you can actually go either way. If you've got Runechanter's Pike, sometimes it's actually better to just mill yourself so that you can try and get some more cards into your own graveyard to power up that Runechanter's Pike. A lot like the Delver decks used to do when they were in Standard. Anticipate, this is another card that just came out. Sort of a ghetto reprint of Impulse. You get to look at the top 3, put 1 into your hand, the rest on the bottom. The nice thing is that it's an instant too, and it allows you to see 3 deep. Inaction Injunction, this is a card that, you know, definitely has its uses when it comes up. For 2 mana, draw a card, not super great, but it does allow you to take care of a potential blocker, which can be huge if you're swinging for the win, or you need to deal with an opponent's commander that's getting ready to use a tap ability. This can sometimes be great against something like Kiki Jiki, if you want to be able to stall for 1 more turn. Next we have See Beyond. This one is always kind of nice because you can draw 2 cards and then put something from your hand, like a land that you don't need anymore, back into your library. So it allows you to filter your hand a little bit. Think Twice, obviously a great card. It allows you to draw 1 at instant speed for 2 mana, and then during future turns you can also flash it back. So this is basically, with Talrand, 5 mana, draw 2 cards, get 2 Drakes. And if you think about it like that, Think Twice is actually huge for this deck. Next we have Council of Sword Tommy, basically just divination with the Kamigawa art. And then obviously here's our divination. Next we have Deep Analysis. A lot of you that have seen a fair amount of my games will have seen this card before. You know, the 4 mana to draw 2 cards, not particularly exciting, but being able to flash it back at 2 mana for 2 more cards at the cost of 3 life can sometimes be huge, and it can make you hit those land drops, or it can get you the gas that you need to you know, keep the game competitive. Next we have Concentrate. This is a card that, you know, I kind of go both ways on. I don't love 4 mana at sorcery speed for 3 cards, but again, we have to have some bigger draw spells. There's just a lot of cards in this type of range. This was the one that I just sort of picked out when I was putting the deck together. You know, they've got Jace's Ingenuity for, I think, 1 more mana to be able to play it at instant. That may just be better depending on your circumstances. Sometimes it was actually kind of nice to be able to play Talrand, say, turn 3, and then be able to play Concentrate turn 4 to get our Drake and to help partially refill our hand. Next we've got Talrand's Invocation. Obviously his signature card, for 4 mana you get 2/2/2 Drakes, but with him out you actually get 3, which can be just awesome. 6 power with flying for 4 mana is just great value. Next we've got some newer cards, obviously Treasure Cruise, a card which has warped a lot of formats. This is another card that's great with all of our cheap draw spells. Once we've used up all of those, we have the ability to just delve them and turn this into an Ancestral Recall, which is amazing if you've never had the chance to play one of those. And we're getting towards the end here. We've got Dig Through Time. Obviously, as an instant, this card is nuts. You get to dig 7 deep, pick 2 cards, put the rest back in the bottom of your library. Again, combos really well with all of our cheap draw spells. One thing to caution, though, if you are using this deck, is Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time obviously tempt you with Delve, and to some degree, Logic Knot. Those obviously are sort of a non-bow with Runechanter's Pike, so you do want to be very careful with, you know, if you're playing Runechanter's Pike, you'll probably want to hold off on Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. Next is a card that didn't get a lot of love, despite being really hyped when they first spoiled it. This is Temporal Trespass. Again, another Delve card. This card was actually really fun in testing. I found that I could actually fairly regularly get to casting this at basically time warp mana, you know, paying 5 for it and getting to take an extra turn just because of all the junk that was in our graveyard. And taking an extra turn with a lot of 2 or 3 power flyers can be game changing. So this is one that I really liked. And lastly, Blue Sun Zenith, one of the just sweet value blue draw spells. You know, obviously it's an instant. You have to pay 3 up front to draw X cards, but it always shuffles back in. So even when you start getting later on in the game, you can always depend on Blue Sun Zenith to draw you at least a couple cards, give you your Drake, and then go back into the library so that you can get it again. And if nothing else, you do have the ability to play this for 0 to draw no cards and just pump out Drakes. So, you know, if the game goes really long and you're starting to get to the point where you might deck yourself, that's the oven, we're cooking dinner right now, it obviously allows you to just play, shuffle, play, shuffle, play, shuffle, and you can keep putting it back into your library, which is nice. This is also another good way to keep you from decking yourself. You can obviously just play it and put it back in your library, draw it, play it, put it back in your library. So, assuming that you do have it in hand, it can be a house against certain mill decks. So anyways, this is my Talrand Sky Summoner deck. Like I said, it's a lot of fun. It's just a nice little tempo blue deck, but it has a lot of legs. You know, it really is a blast getting to draw just a ton of cards, having some counterspells, having some removal. You don't really ever feel like you're out of games. You know, it just takes one draw card to get a draw card to get a draw card, and suddenly you have 3 or 4 Drakes all in one turn, and it only costs you 4 mana for 8, you know, sometimes 12 power on the field on a pretty regular basis. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought of this Talrand deck. Like I said, it's a blast. This one's kind of a budget deck. Like I said, you can put this thing together pretty cheap. I think when I put it together the first time, it cost me something like 8 or 9 tickets, sparing a couple cards, like Dig Through Time and Cavern of Souls. So, you know, if you're looking for a really cheap kind of budget deck to get started on Magic the Gathering Online and you want to be able to, you know, have some fun games, I definitely recommend this one. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed this deck when it's on the channel. Like I said, it's a blast to play. If you like this video, leave it a like. Let me know what you think of the deck. Do you see anything that you know, you don't like, you think maybe would be better? I've toyed around with a couple cards here and there, but this was kind of ended up being my final build that I was most comfortable playing with. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. But until next time, this is Epion, signing off.